The wind howled through the deserted streets of Sector 9K, carrying with it the sharp sting of ice crystals and the heavy scent of rust. Once a thriving residential area, this forgotten corner had deteriorated into a wasteland of abandoned structures and corroded metal. Streetlights flickered weakly, their neon glow barely penetrating the dense snowfall that had been relentlessly pummeling the sector for days. Sarah trudged through knee-deep snow, each step requiring more effort than the last. Her pale blue skin had taken on an alarming grayish tinge around the fingertips and lips, signs of hypothermia setting in. Silver hair, normally luminous under proper lighting, hung in frozen clumps around her gaunt face. The thin garment she wore, designed for the temperate climate of her home world, provided little protection against Earth's brutal winter. 17 doors. She had knocked on 17 doors since nightfall, each one closing in her face, some with harsh words, others with fearful glances, and a few with the mechanical click of security systems engaging. The pattern was always the same. The momentary hope as footsteps approached from within, followed by the crushing disappointment of rejection. Some hadn't even bothered to speak, simply taking one look at her alien features before slamming the door. No pressure, Gideon remarked with a hint of gallows humor. Thomas acknowledged this with a slight nod. The burden is heavy, but you don't carry it alone. He gestured toward the bustling activity around them. Every person here shares in this mission, even those who remain behind. As Thomas departed to oversee final preparations, Sarah and Gideon made their way to the scout vessel's boarding area. The ship itself was modest in size, a research vessel repurposed for long-range exploration, its hull bearing the scars of previous missions and hasty repairs. The rest of their team awaited them. Jaina, the neural interface specialist who had helped access Sarah's implant data. Captain Ellis, a former director pilot who had defected years earlier when ordered to lose a transport of alien refugees in deep space. And Dr. Kell, a xenobiologist whose expertise would be crucial in assessing the outpost's current condition. All final checks complete, Captain Ellis reported as they joined the group. We're cleared for departure in 30 minutes. The next half hour passed in a blur of final briefings, equipment checks, and farewell exchanges with those remaining behind. Thomas personally supervised their boarding, providing each team member with emergency protocols should communication with the network be compromised. 48 hours to reach the coordinates, he reminded them. Another 12 to establish contact and confirm viability. If we don't hear from you within 72 hours of your departure, we'll assume the worst and implement contingency plans. As Sarah prepared to board, Maya appeared, approaching with a purpose in her stride that suggested more than a simple farewell. A moment, she requested, drawing Sarah slightly apart from the others. What is it? Sarah asked, noting the unusual tension in Maya's typically controlled demeanor. A message, Maya replied, handing her a small data crystal. From Lyra, the girl Thomas rescued. She's been working on something she believes might help with your mission. The data is encoded for your neural implant specifically. Sarah accepted the crystal with a questioning look. What does it contain? She wouldn't say, not even to Thomas. Only that it was meant for your eyes alone, and that you would understand when the time came. Maya's expression softened slightly. Lyra has abilities that emerged as she matured. Perceptive abilities beyond normal human or alien capacity. Thomas trusts her insights implicitly. Before Sarah could inquire further, the final boarding call sounded. With a brief nod of thanks, she tucked the crystal into a secure pocket and joined the others entering the vessel. The interior was utilitarian in design. Functional workstations, minimal personal space, and equipment racks occupying most available surfaces. Captain Ellis took position at the main controls while the rest of the team secured themselves for departure. Gideon found a seat beside Sarah as the entry hatch sealed with a pressurized hiss. Everything all right? He asked, noting her pensive expression. Sarah nodded, deciding to keep Maya's cryptic delivery to herself until she had a chance to examine its contents. Just processing. Everything's happened so quickly, from freezing outside your door to departing Earth entirely. It doesn't seem quite real. I know what you mean, Gideon agreed, glancing around at their compact surroundings. 3 days ago, my biggest concern was maintaining heat in my shelter. Now, he gestured vaguely toward the viewport where Earth's curve was visible. The vessel's engines engaged with a deep vibration that ran through the hull. Captain Ellis's voice came over the internal communication system. Departure protocols initiated. Detaching from platform in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are free and clear. A subtle shift in the artificial gravity field was the only immediate indication that they had begun moving away from the orbital platform. On the main view screen, the structure receded gradually, Earth's blue expanse forming a magnificent backdrop. Course plotted for Primary Outpost 3, Ellis continued. Transition to FTL drive in approximately 2 hours once we clear the outer system monitoring grid. All systems nominal. For Sarah, who had arrived on Earth as a desperate refugee in a cramped transport pod with dozens of others, the relative comfort and purpose of this departure formed a stark contrast. She watched through the viewport as her temporary home grew smaller, emotions conflicted. Earth had brought her both suffering and salvation, closed doors and an open one. What are you thinking? Gideon asked quietly, observing her contemplative silence. About patterns, she replied. How things come full circle. I arrived on Earth fleeing persecution, and now I leave the same way. But this time, I'm not alone. Gideon considered this. None of us are anymore. That's the point, isn't it? What your people and ours are trying to build together. The simplicity of this observation struck Sarah with unexpected force. The fundamental truth at the core of all their efforts. Not merely escape or survival, but connection, community. The antithesis of the Directorate's philosophy of separation and hierarchy. The first hours of their journey passed in relative calm as they established routines and familiarized themselves with the vessel's operations. Once they had cleared the outer system and engaged the FTL drive, a moment marked by a brief disorientation as normal space seemed to fold around them, the team gathered in the small communal area for a more detailed mission briefing. Captain Ellis displayed the data Sarah had provided about Primary Outpost 3 on the main view screen. Based on these specifications, we're looking at a facility capable of supporting approximately 3,000 individuals with expansion potential. Manufacturing capabilities, agricultural domes, medical facilities, essentially a self-contained colony. If it remains operational, Dr. Kell cautioned, these outposts were established years ago. Even with automated maintenance systems, degradation is inevitable without regular human or alien intervention. The most recent update in my data shows significant upgrades to Outpost 3 approximately 16 months before I left my homeworld, Sarah noted. According to Marcus, there's been ongoing maintenance we weren't informed about, which we'll verify upon arrival. Ellis responded pragmatically. For now, let's focus on approach protocols and initial contact procedures. The discussion continued, each team member contributing expertise to the mission planning. As the others debated technical aspects of their approach, Sarah found her thoughts returning to the data Crystal Maya had given her. When there was a natural break in the conversation, she excused herself, retreating to the small personal space she had been allocated. Once alone, she retrieved the crystal, examining it carefully. Its design was familiar, compatible with her neural implant's external interface port. With a slight hesitation, she positioned it against her temple where the implant's access point lay beneath her skin. The connection was immediate, a flood of sensory input that momentarily overwhelmed her conscious thought. Images, sounds, and data patterns resolved gradually into coherent form. Not simple information, but a message from Lyra, as Maya had said, but delivered in a format that transcended conventional communication. What Sarah experienced was something between memory and vision. She saw through Lyra's eyes as the young alien woman accessed ancient knowledge preserved from her own culture. Patterns of thought and perception unique to her species applied to the challenge before them. The message was both warning and revelation. The Directorate's pursuit was more determined than they had realized. Lyra had accessed communications indicating knowledge not just of the outpost's existence, but specific targeting protocols for Outpost 3 in particular. Somehow, they had obtained partial coordinates. More importantly, Lyra had discovered something about the outpost itself, a secondary security system not documented in Sarah's implant data, a protective measure designed to shield the facility from precisely the kind of detection the Directorate was attempting. The activation sequence required a specific perceptual ability possessed by certain individuals of Lyra's species, and by Sarah herself, though she had never been trained to use it. The vision message included instruction, techniques for accessing this, dormant ability, crucial sequences that would be needed upon approaching the outpost. Without this preparation, their arrival might trigger defensive measures rather than recognition and welcome. As the connection terminated, Sarah sat in stunned silence, processing what she had received. The implications were significant. Their mission was both more dangerous and more crucial than they had realized. The Directorate was closer to locating the outpost than anyone had suspected. She debated whether to share this information immediately or wait until she had processed it more thoroughly. The techniques Lyra had shared required practice, concentration, abilities Sarah wasn't certain she could master in the limited time available. A soft knock at her door interrupted these thoughts. "Sarah," Gideon's voice came through the panel. "Ellis is requesting your presence on the bridge. We're receiving some kind of transmission." All deliberation evaporated at these words. Sarah quickly rejoined the others on the bridge, where Captain Ellis and Jaina were analyzing a signal that had begun registering on their communications array. "It started approximately 3 minutes ago," Ellis explained as Sarah entered. "Directed transmission, specifically on frequencies mentioned in your outpost data. Can you decode it?" Sarah asked, examining the pattern displayed on the monitor. Jaina shook her head. "Not with our current encryption protocols. It's using something we've never encountered." Sarah studied the signal pattern more closely, recognition dawning. "It's not encrypted, at least not conventionally. It's using a perceptual algorithm developed by my people." The information from Lyra's vision suddenly seemed more immediately relevant. "I might be able to interpret it, but I'll need to interface directly." Captain Ellis looked skeptical. "Interface with our communications array? That's not standard procedure." "This isn't a standard situation," Sarah interrupted. "The signal is specifically designed to be recognized by neural patterns unique to my species. Your equipment can receive it, but not interpret it." After a brief consultation, the team agreed to allow Sarah to attempt the interface. Jaina assisted in establishing a safe connection between Sarah's neural implant and the communication system, a delicate procedure that carried some risk but offered their only chance at understanding the transmission. As the connection stabilized, Sarah closed her eyes, focusing on the techniques Lyra had shared. The signal patterns flowed through her consciousness, gradually resolving into meaningful form. Not words or images exactly, but concepts that her mind translated into understandable terms. "It's a beacon," she said finally, opening her eyes. "Automated, it seems. Designed to activate when certain approach vectors are detected." She hesitated, confronting the implications. "It's detecting us already at this distance. And it's detecting something else as well." "The Directorate?" Gideon asked, voicing the concern they all shared. "I don't think so. Not directly." Sarah frowned, struggling to articulate what she had perceived. "More like echoes, remnants of tracking algorithms attached to our vessel's signature." Captain Ellis immediately ordered a full diagnostic sweep of their systems. "Could be residual tracking code embedded in the ship's identifier. This vessel was salvaged from a Directorate research outpost years ago. We purged all known tracking modules, but some could have remained dormant until activated by proximity to specific targets." Jaina finished, already moving to a technical station to assist with the scan. "Like outpost coordinates." The diagnostic confirmed Sarah's perception. Subtle but sophisticated tracking code had been embedded deep in the vessel's navigational system, designed to activate only when approaching coordinates matching specific parameters. They've been playing a longer game than we realized, Gideon observed grimly as they reviewed the findings. Using our own escape plans against us. Can we remove it? Sarah asked. Not without disabling critical navigation systems, Ellis replied. But we can implement a signal masking protocol. Create enough noise that the tracking becomes ineffective. Do it, Sarah decided, and alter our approach vector. If the Directorate is monitoring these tracking signals, we need to create confusion about our actual destination. As Ellis and Jaina worked to implement these countermeasures, Sarah shared what she had learned from Lyra's data crystal. The Directorate's specific targeting of Outpost 3 and a secondary security system they would need to navigate upon arrival. So we're racing them there, Dr. Kell surmised. And we need to activate special protective measures when we arrive. Measures that only Sarah can implement, Gideon added, glancing at her with concern. Using abilities she's never trained to use. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I can do this. Lyra's techniques are resonating with something that was always there, just dormant. With practice during our journey, I'll be prepared. The next 48 hours took on a new intensity as they continued toward their destination, periodically altering course to confuse any tracking. Sarah devoted herself to mastering the perceptual techniques Lyra had shared, working with Jaina to refine her ability to interface with the ship's systems as practice for what she would need to do at the outpost. Gideon often joined these sessions, providing support and sometimes serving as a test subject as Sarah learned to perceive patterns beyond normal sensory input. His presence grounded her when the alien techniques threatened to overwhelm her consciousness, a human anchor to reality. It's like learning to see a color that's always been there, but you never had a name for, she tried to explain during one practice session. Once you understand it exists, you can't stop seeing it. Is it painful? Gideon asked, noting the strain evident in her expression after particularly intensive practice. Not exactly, Sarah replied. Disorienting, sometimes overwhelming. My brain is forming new neural pathways to process information it wasn't originally designed to handle. Like a muscle developing through exercise, Jaina suggested, monitoring Sarah's neural activity. A muscle that connects to something larger, Sarah corrected. Something beyond individual perception. As they approached the coordinates for primary outpost 3, the automated beacon grew stronger, more complex in its patterns. Sarah's growing ability allowed her to extract more information from the transmission. Confirmation that the outpost remained operational, that its automated defense systems were active, and most importantly, that it contained life signs. There are people there, she announced after one particularly clear connection. Not just maintenance systems. The outpost is inhabited. The news energized the team, transforming their mission from hopeful exploration to confirmed contact. Captain Ellis began formal approach procedures, implementing the specialized protocols Sarah had identified from the beacon's instructions. When they finally dropped out of FTL travel at the outer perimeter of the star system containing Outpost 3, the view screen revealed an unremarkable-looking solar system, a yellow-orange star similar to Earth's sun, with several planets in stable orbits. The outpost itself was not immediately visible, located on a moon orbiting the fourth planet from the star. Standard scan shows nothing unusual, Ellis reported. If I didn't have the exact coordinates, I would fly right past this system without a second look. That's by design, Sarah explained. The outpost's external appearance is meant to blend with the natural features of the moon's surface. From orbit, it would appear as nothing more than geographical formations. As they adjusted course toward the designated moon, the ship's sensors registered a subtle change in the beacon's transmission pattern. Its shifting frequency, Jaina noted, becoming more directed. Recognition protocol, Sarah confirmed. It's acknowledged our approach and is now providing more specific guidance. She hesitated, then added, and it's expecting a response. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the implementation of the security measures Lyra had revealed. Sarah connected once more to the communications array, But this time, instead of passively receiving, she actively projected the perceptual patterns she had practiced. The effort was intense, requiring a level of concentration that left her physically drained. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she maintained the complex mental configurations necessary for authentication. Just when it seemed she might not be able to sustain the effort, the response came, a sudden shift in the beacon's pattern that signaled acceptance. "We're cleared for approach," she announced, disconnecting from the interface with shaking hands. "The outpost defensive systems have recognized us as friendly." Gideon was immediately at her side, supporting her as the effort took its toll. "You did it," he said quietly. Captain Ellis didn't waste time on celebration, immediately implementing the approach vectors that had been provided. Entering lunar orbit in 15 minutes. Prepare for descent procedures. As they drew closer, the moon's surface came into sharper focus on their view screens. What had initially appeared as natural geological features began to reveal subtle patterns of organization. Structures integrated so perfectly with the landscape that they were nearly invisible to casual observation. "There," Sarah indicated, pointing to what seemed like a canyon system on the surface. "That's the main docking area. The entrance is concealed, but it's there." Following her guidance, Ellis navigated toward the indicated location. As they descended into the atmosphere, a signal activated from the surface, not the beacon this time, but a direct communication. "Unknown vessel. Identify yourself and state your purpose," came a voice over their communication system. The language was standard interstellar common, but the accent was unmistakably from Sarah's homeworld. Sarah responded immediately, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "This is Sarah. Authorization sequence Gamma 937 Delta, accompanied by representatives from Earth's resistance network. We come seeking sanctuary and alliance." A pause followed, then, authentication confirmed. "Welcome, carrier. We've been expecting you." The canyon below them suddenly transformed, sections of what had appeared to be solid rock sliding apart to reveal a massive docking bay built into the moon's surface. Guidance lights activated along the approach path, directing them toward a designated landing area. As they made their final descent, the scale of the facility became apparent. The docking bay alone could accommodate dozens of vessels larger than their own. Support structures, maintenance equipment, and what appeared to be defensive installations lined the walls of the enormous chamber. And there were people, hundreds visible from their approach vector alone. Humans and aliens of various species working together, pausing in their activities to observe the arriving vessel. Among them, Sarah recognized representatives of her own kind, the distinctive blue skin and silver hair marking them clearly. "It's real," Gideon murmured beside her, awe evident in his voice. "Everything you carried, everything we hoped for, it's actually here." Captain Ellis completed the landing sequence with practiced precision, settling the ship onto the designated platform. As the engines powered down, a welcoming committee approached. A diverse group, led by a tall figure with features similar to Sarah's, though his bearing suggested significant age and authority. "Prepare for disembarkation," Ellis announced. "Standard protocols, Dr. Kell and I will exit first, followed by Sarah and Gideon, with Jaina providing technical support if needed." Sarah barely heard these instructions, her attention fixed on the approaching group. After so long carrying the burden of her people's hope, after the desperate journey that had brought her to Gideon's door and then beyond Earth itself, the moment of arrival seemed almost surreal. As the ship's hatch opened, admitting the atmosphere of her new home, perhaps her final home, Sarah felt Gideon's presence beside her, solid and reassuring. Whatever came next, they would face it together, representatives of two peoples brought together by circumstance and choice. The tall alien stepped forward as Dr. Kell and Captain Ellis established initial contact. His gaze found Sarah immediately, recognition evident in his expression. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of authority tempered by profound relief. "The 18 doors have opened at last," he said, using a traditional greeting from Sarah's homeworld. "The path is complete." Sarah recognized the ceremonial response required. and those who were separated shall find community once more. The formality of the exchange broke as the elders smiled, a genuine expression of welcome. I am Sentinel Taris, administrator of Primary Outpost 3. On behalf of all who have found sanctuary here, I welcome you and your companions. As introductions continued, Sarah gradually became aware of the vastness of what they had discovered. This wasn't merely a refuge or hiding place. It was a thriving community. The visible portion of the facility extended far beyond the docking bay, tunnels and corridors leading deeper into the moon's interior, where an entire society had taken root. How many? She asked Taris as they were led from the landing area into a reception chamber. Nearly 2,000 at present, he replied. Representatives from 27 worlds affected by Directorate expansion. We've been preparing for your arrival, and those who will follow, for years. The Earth Network estimates potentially 10,000 refugees seeking evacuation, Gideon noted. If the Directorate's persecution continues to intensify, Taris nodded, unsurprised by this figure. We can accommodate them. This outpost is one of 5 currently operational, with combined capacity for over 50,000. More importantly, we have the resources and technology to establish additional habitats if necessary. The reception chamber opened into a vast atrium, a multi-level space where the outpost's true nature became fully apparent. Transparent panels in the ceiling revealed the star-filled sky above, while the levels below teemed with activity. Gardens, living quarters, work areas, and communal spaces created the impression not of a military installation or emergency shelter, but of a carefully designed community. This is beyond what I imagined, Sarah admitted, taking in the scope of what had been achieved. As it was meant to be, Taris replied. The outposts were never designed merely for survival, but for thriving, for creating a new model of existence beyond the Directorate's reach. He gestured toward where humans and various alien species worked side by side. What you see here is the future we envision, cooperation rather than competition, diversity as strength rather than threat. As they continued their tour, learning about the outpost's operations and meeting key personnel, the true significance of what they had discovered gradually sank in. This wasn't simply a safe haven or temporary refuge. It was the foundation for an entirely new civilization, one built on principles diametrically opposed to the Directorate's philosophy of segregation and control. Evening found them in a communal dining area, sharing a meal with representatives from various sectors of the outpost community. The atmosphere was one of cautious celebration, joy at the connection established with Earth's resistance network, tempered by awareness of the challenges still ahead. The scout vessel must return soon, Taris noted as they discussed next steps. Your network awaits confirmation that it's safe to begin evacuation procedures. We can depart within 24 hours, Captain Ellis confirmed. With your permission, I'd like Dr. Kell and Jaina to remain here. Their expertise will be valuable in preparing for the arrival from Earth. Granted, Taris agreed. And what of you two? He asked, addressing Sarah and Gideon directly. Will you return with the vessel, or remain here? The question caught Sarah by surprise. She had been so focused on completing her mission, delivering the authentication codes, establishing contact, that she hadn't considered what would come next for her personally. She hesitated, glancing at Gideon. I hadn't decided. Gideon seemed equally uncertain. My place has been with the network, helping others find their way. But now, consider it carefully, Taris advised. Both of you have valuable perspectives that would benefit either community. The choice is yours to make. Later, as the outpost's lighting dimmed to simulate evening, Sarah found herself on an observation platform overlooking the main atrium. The vast space below had quieted somewhat, though activity continued in essential areas regardless of the artificial day-night cycle. Gideon joined her there, his expression thoughtful as he gazed out at the community they had discovered. Quite a journey from door number 18, he observed. Sarah smiled slightly at the reference. I never imagined where that door would lead. Do you regret any of it? He asked. The hardships, the danger, being used as a pawn in Marcus's grand strategy? Sarah considered the question seriously. No, she decided finally. The methods were sometimes cruel, but the purpose was worthy. And without them, she gestured toward the thriving community below. This connection might never have happened. They stood in companionable silence for a time, each contemplating Tari's question about their future plans. I think I should return with Ellis, Gideon said finally. The network needs experienced guides to help refugees navigate the evacuation routes. People who understand both sides of the journey. Sarah nodded, having reached a similar conclusion. And I should remain here, at least initially. My neural implant contains data relevant to the other outposts. Information that needs to be properly integrated into their systems. Despite the logic of these decisions, a certain sadness accompanied them. The prospect of separation after all they had experienced together. It won't be permanent, Gideon added, sensing her thoughts. Once the primary evacuation is complete, once the routes are established, I could return, if that would be welcome. It would, Sarah replied simply. The connection between them had grown beyond mere circumstance or shared mission. A bond formed through crisis and trust that neither wished to sever. Then that's settled, Gideon said with a slight smile. I'll help bring others through door 18 and then find my way back here. Sarah returned the smile, appreciating the symmetry of this plan. A journey worth making. As they continued their observation of the community below, a familiar figure approached. Tari's, accompanied by several outpost administrators. Pardon the interruption, the elder said as he joined them. But there's something you should know. Our long-range sensors have detected unusual activity in the outer system. A directorate signature, we believe. The peaceful moment shattered as implications cascaded through their thoughts. They followed us. Gideon asked, alarm evident in his voice. Not directly, Tari's clarified. The pattern suggests a scout vessel, not a pursuit craft. But their presence in this system is concerning nonetheless. The tracking code embedded in our ship, Sarah realized. Even with our countermeasures, they must have detected enough to narrow down the search area. What's their current status? Gideon asked, military training evident in his immediate focus on tactical considerations. Holding position at the system's edge, one of the administrators reported. Standard reconnaissance pattern. They haven't detected the outpost specifically, but they're clearly searching methodically. We need to adjust our plans, Sarah said decisively. Captain Ellis should depart immediately, but alter course significantly before returning to Earth. Create false trails, misdirection. Tari's nodded in agreement. We've already begun implementing enhanced concealment protocols for the outpost itself. Our defenses are considerable, but we prefer to remain undetected rather than engage directly. And the evacuation? Gideon asked. Proceeds, but with additional precautions, Tari's replied. Alternative approach vectors, staggered arrivals, stronger masking technologies. It will slow the process, but safety must take priority. As the administrators departed to implement these adjustments, Sarah and Gideon remained on the platform, the comfortable silence of moments earlier replaced by renewed tension. It never ends, does it? Sarah observed quietly. The directorate's reach, the constant need to stay one step ahead. Not yet, Gideon acknowledged. But someday perhaps. If enough people find their way through door 18, if enough communities like this one take root beyond their control. He gestured toward the living tapestry of cooperation visible below them. This is what terrifies them most, proof that their entire philosophy is unnecessary. That different species can not only coexist, but thrive together. Sarah considered this, finding hope in his perspective despite the renewed threat. Then we continue the work. You guiding people to the doors, me helping build what lies beyond them. And meeting in the middle, Gideon added with determination in his voice. The next morning brought accelerated preparations for the scout vessel's departure. Captain Ellis had implemented the recommended course adjustments, plotting a complex return journey designed to confuse any directorate tracking attempts. As the time for departure approached, Sarah accompanied Gideon to the docking bay where the ship was being readied. The farewell would be brief by necessity. Technical communications between the outpost and Earth's network would be heavily encrypted and limited to essential information only. "I've been authorized to give you this," Sarah said, handing Gideon a small communication device of unfamiliar design. "It's paired specifically to you, biometrically locked. If you activate it upon your return to Earth, I'll know you've arrived safely." Gideon accepted the device, recognizing the gift for what it was, not just a practical tool, but a connection between them that would transcend the physical distance soon to separate them. "I'll use it," he promised, "and when the time comes to return, it will guide me back here." Around them, final preparations continued, supplies being loaded, systems checked, security protocols verified. Captain Ellis stood near the ship's entry, reviewing departure clearances with outpost personnel. "It's time," Gideon noted as Ellis gestured toward him. Sarah nodded, emotion threatening to overcome her carefully maintained composure. "Be safe," she said simply. "Always," Gideon replied with a ghost of smile. Then, more seriously, "This isn't an ending, Sarah. It's the beginning of something far greater than either of us imagined when you knocked on my door." "Door number 18, she reminded him. The one that opened, he completed the thought. Without further words, he turned and made his way to the waiting vessel. Sarah remained in the observation area as pre-launch procedures were completed, watching as the ship that had carried them across the stars prepared to make its return journey. As the vessel lifted off, navigating smoothly toward the concealed exit, Sarah found herself joined by Sentinel Taris. The elder alien stood beside her in respectful silence until the ship had disappeared from view. "It is not easy, being the carrier," he observed finally, "bearing the weight of connection between worlds." "No," Sarah agreed, "but necessary." Taris nodded in understanding. "Come," he said after a moment. "There is much work to be done. The first refugees from Earth will begin arriving within weeks. We must be ready to welcome them properly." As they turned from the now empty docking bay, Sarah cast one final glance toward where Gideon's ship had vanished. Though physically separated by vast distances, their paths remained inextricably linked, two sides of the same door, connecting worlds that had too long remained apart. In the years that followed, the network between Earth and the outposts grew stronger, more sophisticated. Thousands made the journey, guided by people like Gideon, who understood both what they fled and what awaited them. The outpost communities expanded, establishing new habitats and eventually full colonies on suitable worlds beyond the Directorate's reach. The Directorate itself gradually lost its stranglehold on Earth as more of its citizens questioned policies built on fear and separation. The evidence provided by thriving multi-species communities beyond their control undermined the fundamental premise of their authority. And somewhere in this evolving tapestry of connection, a blue-skinned woman with silver hair continued to monitor a special communication device, waiting for the signal that would announce the return of the human who had opened door number 18 when 17 others had remained closed. The door that had changed everything. "Aliens," a woman had hissed through a crack in door number 12. "Directorate'll have my citizenship revoked if they catch me harboring." Door number 15 had been opened by an elderly man whose initial expression of pity quickly hardened in his self-preservation. "Can't help you, miss. They're scanning this sector tonight." The Directorate. Sarah shuddered, not entirely from the cold. Their policies had forced her to flee her home planet when the purges began. And here, on Earth, their shadow loomed just as large. According to the broadcast that played endlessly in public spaces, aliens were a threat to human prosperity, parasites consuming resources meant for Earth citizens. The messaging was clear: report alien sightings immediately or face severe consequences. Sarah stumbled, catching herself against the frozen metal of a mailbox. Her vision blurred momentarily as exhaustion threatened to overtake her. The datapad hidden in her inner pocket, containing the coordinates of rumored safe houses, had died hours ago. She was navigating blind now, operating on instinct and desperation alone. Through the curtain of snow, a faint yellow light caught her attention. Building number 18 stood slightly apart from the others, smaller and more dilapidated. Unlike the pristine structures in the upper levels of the city, this one showed signs of haphazard repairs. Mismatched metal sheets covering gaps in the walls, a door that didn't quite align with its frame. Sarah hesitated. The bitter pattern of rejection had worn her resolve thin. Perhaps it would be better to find shelter in one of the abandoned buildings, to curl up in some forgotten corner until morning, if she survived the night. But the weak glow emanating from behind frost-covered windows spoke of warmth within, a basic necessity that had become a luxury. One more door, she decided. One final attempt before surrendering to the elements. Her numb fingers formed a weak fist as she knocked, the sound barely audible even to her own ears. She waited, counting her ragged breaths, watching them materialize as pale clouds before dissipating into the darkness. Nothing. Sarah knocked again, putting the last of her strength into the effort. She pressed her forehead against the cold metal, feeling consciousness beginning to slip away. This was it then? The end of her journey, frozen outside door number 18 in a sector that the world had forgotten. Just as her knees began to buckle, the sound of approaching footsteps reached her ears. Sarah straightened, summoning what dignity remained. The door's lock mechanism whirred and clicked, a familiar prelude to rejection. The door swung open. A man stood in the doorway, his silhouette backlit by the glow of what appeared to be a small furnace within. Human, tall and thin, with dark hair streaked prematurely with gray. His eyes, a deep brown that bordered on black, widened slightly at the sight of her, taking in her blue skin, the silver hair, the obvious alien features. Sarah braced herself for the slam that would follow. Instead, after a moment of silence broken only by the howling wind, he stepped aside. "Come in," he said, voice rough from disuse. "Before the drones make their rounds." Sarah stood frozen, unable to process this deviation from the established pattern. The man's gaze flicked anxiously to the sky, then back to her. "Quickly," he urged, reaching out as if to pull her inside. Sarah flinched instinctively at the movement, but the man didn't touch her. Instead, his hand hovered in the space between them, an offer, not a demand. With the last of her strength fading fast, Sarah stepped across the threshold. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like salvation. The interior of the man's shelter was cramped but meticulously organized, but it radiated a blessed heat that immediately began to thaw her frozen limbs. In one corner stood a narrow bed, its thin blanket neatly folded. Beside it, a desk had been fashioned from scrap metal and what appeared to be an old door. Atop it sat various tools, electronic components, and a stack of worn paper notebooks, a rarity in a world that had largely gone digital. "Sit," the man said, gesturing toward the furnace. "You need to warm up." Sarah remained standing, keeping her back to the door despite the overwhelming urge to collapse before the heat source. "Why?" she managed through chattering teeth. The man paused in the act of reaching for a blanket. "Why what? Why did you let me in?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he retrieved the blanket and held it out to her, maintaining a careful distance. When she made no move to take it, he simply placed it on the floor between them. 17 doors, he said finally. Sarah blinked, uncomprehending. "I'll watch from the window," he explained. "You've knocked on 17 doors since entering this street. None open for you." "That doesn't answer my question." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, there and gone in an instant. 18 was always my lucky number. It wasn't the real reason. Sarah could sense the evasion, but she was too exhausted to press further. The pull of the furnace's warmth proved too strong to resist. She took a tentative step toward it, then another, finally sinking to the floor before the glowing heat. The blanket remained where he had placed it, though every fiber of her being cried out for its added warmth. The man made no move to approach her, instead retreating to the small kitchen area where he began preparing something on a hot plate. The aroma of reconstituted soup filled the small space, making Sarah's empty stomach clench painfully. "I'm Gideon," he said without turning around. Sarah remained silent, curling her fingers toward the furnace's warmth. After a moment, she offered, "Sarah, is it your real name, or one you adopted for Earth?" The question caught her off guard. Most humans didn't bother to consider that aliens might use different names to blend in. Adopted, she admitted. My real name is unpronounceable in your language. Gideon nodded, as if this confirmed something for him. He poured the soup into a chipped mug and set it on the floor near her, again maintaining his distance. It's not much, he said, but it's hot. Sarah stared at the mug, conflict raging within her. Pride warred with desperate hunger. Suspicion battled against the basic survival instinct to accept what was offered. In the end, necessity won out. She reached for the mug, wrapping her blue fingers around its warm ceramic surface before bringing it to her lips. The broth was thin and bland, but the warmth of it sliding down her throat felt like life itself returning to her frozen body. She drank deeply, only barely managing to maintain the dignity of not gulping it down all at once. "Thank you," she said softly when she had finished, setting the empty mug aside. Gideon had moved to his desk, where he was making notes in one of the paper notebooks. At her words, he glanced up briefly. "You're welcome." He hesitated, then added, "You can take the bed. I'll sleep by the furnace." Sarah's gaze hardened. "Why are you helping me? What do you want in return?" Gideon set down his pen and turned to face her fully. The shadows cast by the furnace's glow deepened the lines of his face, making him appear older than he likely was. Not everyone who offers help expects payment. In my experience, they do. Gideon's expression darkened. "Then you've met the wrong humans." Sarah laughed, a brittle, hollow sound. "I've yet to meet the right ones. Until tonight, perhaps." She paused, studying him. "You worked for them, didn't you? The directorate." The sudden tension in his shoulders confirmed her suspicion before he spoke. "How did you know?" Sarah nodded toward the maps on the walls. "The notations. Those are directorate code patterns. And your posture when you open the door, trained awareness, scanning for surveillance. You move like someone who's been through their protocol drills." Gideon's expression remained neutral, but his fingers tightened around the pen he still held. "That was another life. But not that long ago," Sarah pressed. "What did you do for them?" The silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the crackling of the furnace. Finally, Gideon set the pen down with deliberate care. "I processed applications," he said, his voice flat. "Residency permits, asylum requests, visa extensions." Understanding dawned on Sarah's face. "You were a rejection officer." Gideon flinched as if she had struck him. "That's what they called us, yes." "How many? How many what? How many of us did you reject?" Sarah's voice remained even, but her eyes had taken on a feverish intensity. Gideon turned away, unable to meet her gaze. "Hundreds, maybe thousands. I stopped counting after a while." "And how many died as a result?" The pen snapped in Gideon's grip. "I don't know," he whispered. "I try not to know." Sarah absorbed this, her expression unreadable. The heat from the furnace had begun to restore her strength, bringing with it the clarity of thought that had been clouded by hypothermia. She should leave, she knew. This man had been part of the system that had hunted her kind, that had forced her to flee from planet to planet. And yet, he had opened his door when 17 others had remained closed. "Why did you leave?" she asked, her tone softer now. Gideon stood abruptly, moving to a small cabinet from which he withdrew a bottle containing an amber liquid. He poured a measure into a glass, but didn't drink it, merely staring at the contents as if they might hold answers. "There was a family," he began, his voice barely audible above the wind that continued to howl outside. "A mother and 3 children. Their father had already been granted residency due to his specialized skills, quantum engineering. They were supposed to join him once their papers were processed." Sarah remained silent, watching as Gideon's knuckles whitened around the glass. "Their file came to my desk flagged for expedited approval. But that morning, we had received new directives. Stricter quotas, tighter restrictions." He took a ragged breath. I applied the stamp. "Rejected. What happened to them?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Their transport was rerouted to a processing facility on Luna. There was a malfunction in the life support systems. Official report cited mechanical failure." Gideon finally raised the glass to his lips draining its contents in one swift motion. Unofficial channels said it was deliberate, a message to others who might try to circumvent the new restrictions. Sarah pulled the blanket around her shoulders, no longer concerned with maintaining her distance. "So you left?" Gideon nodded. "Not immediately. I try to work within the system first. Question the new directives. Filed appeals for special consideration cases. Used every bureaucratic trick I knew." A bitter smile twisted his lips. "All it got me was flagged as a sympathizer. When they scheduled me for loyalty reconditioning, I knew it was time to disappear." "To Sector 9K, Sarah said, glancing around at their surroundings. "It's off the grid. Minimal surveillance. The director considers it a resource drain to monitor closely, low probability of finding anything worth their attention." Sarah's gaze sharpened. "And yet, you mentioned drones making rounds. Periodic sweeps. Random pattern to catch people off guard." Gideon moved to one of the maps, pointing to a series of markings. "I've been tracking them. There's logic to the randomness, if you know how to look for it. And you're using that knowledge to, what? Hide? Wait out some statute of limitations on disloyalty." Gideon turned to face her, and for the first time, Sarah saw a flash of something fierce in his eyes. "I'm building something. A way out. Not just for me." Before he could elaborate, a low rumbling sound vibrated through the floor. Gideon immediately moved to the window, careful to stay to the side as he peered through the frost-covered glass. "Patrol vehicle," he said tersely, making an unscheduled pass. Sarah tensed, years of survival instincts kicking in. Her eyes darted around the small space, seeking hiding places or escape routes. "They won't come in," Gideon assured her, though he didn't move away from the window. "Not without cause. The building's registered as occupied by a human resident, as long as they don't detect alien biosignatures." A coldness that had nothing to do with the weather settled in Sarah's stomach. "They have scanners?" Gideon nodded grimly. "Standard equipment on patrol vehicles. But these walls are lined with signal-dampening material. It's not perfect, but it should mask your presence unless they're specifically looking." "And if they are?" Gideon stepped away from the window as the patrol vehicle continued past. "Then we use the tunnel." "Tunnel?" Instead of answering, Gideon moved to what appeared to be an ordinary storage cabinet built into the wall. He pressed his palm against a specific spot, and a section of the floor near the bed slid open, revealing a narrow passageway descending into darkness. "It's not finished yet," he explained, "but it'll get you far enough from the building to evade immediate capture if they come in." Sarah stared at the opening, then at Gideon. "You've been planning this for some time." It wasn't a question, but he nodded anyway. "Ever since I arrived here. Sector 9K wasn't my first choice. It was my last resort. But I discovered something unexpected." "What?" "I wasn't the only one hiding from the directorate. There are others in the neighboring sectors. Former officials like me, sympathizers, people who helped aliens and got caught. We found each other, started communicating, started building." "Building what?" Gideon closed the tunnel entrance before responding. "A network. Safe houses, transportation routes, communication channels. Small resistance cells operating independently, but toward a common goal. Which is to help those the directorate has deemed unworthy of help." His gaze met hers steadily. "People like you, Sarah." Sarah absorbed this information in silence, reassessing the man before her. The maps on the walls suddenly took on new meaning. Not just tracking patrol patterns, but mapping potential routes and safe locations. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked finally. "You don't know me. I could be a director at plant." A ghost of a smile touched Gideon's lips. A director at plant wouldn't be knocking on doors in a blizzard, suffering from hypothermia. They have better methods. He paused. "Besides, I've gotten better at reading people since leaving the system. You've been running for a long time. Your distrust is earned, not trained." Sarah didn't confirm or deny his assessment. Instead, she asked, "What happens now?" "Now you rest. Regain your strength. Tomorrow, when the storm passes, we'll see about getting you to a more permanent safe house. There's a Group 3 sectors over that specializes in new identities." The offer hung in the air between them, a lifeline Sarah hadn't dared hope for. Yet wariness still held her back. And if I don't want your help beyond tonight, then the door will be open for you to leave. Gideon's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes spoke of a deeper understanding. I'm not in the business of forcing choices on people anymore, Sarah. The furnace crackled in the silence that followed, sending shadows dancing across the walls. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but within the small shelter, a fragile trust had begun to form, built on shared danger and the simple act of opening a door when 17 others had remained closed. Morning arrived with an eerie silence that spoke of the storm's passing. Sarah woke on the narrow bed, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The events of the previous night came rushing back as she caught sight of Gideon asleep on the floor near the furnace, true to his word. She took the opportunity to study him more carefully in the pale light filtering through the frost-covered windows. Sleep had softened the hard lines of his face, making him appear younger. There was a vulnerability to him now that had been absent in his waking hours, a reminder that beneath the former directorate official lay a human being carrying the weight of his past actions. As if sensing her scrutiny, Gideon's eyes opened. For a brief moment, confusion clouded his expression before recognition dawned. He sat up slowly, wincing as stiff muscles protested the movement. "How are you feeling?" he asked, voice rough with sleep. Sarah took stock of her condition. The dangerous chill had left her body, though a bone-deep weariness remained. "Better," she acknowledged. "Thank you." Gideon nodded, rising to his feet and moving to the small kitchen area, where he began preparing what appeared to be some kind of hot beverage. "The storm's passed," he noted, glancing toward the window. "We should be able to make contact with the network today." "About that," Sarah began, sitting up on the edge of the bed. "I'm not convinced joining your network is the safest option for me." Gideon paused in his preparations. "What other options do you have?" It was a fair question, one Sarah had been contemplating during the restless hours before sleep had claimed her. "I could keep moving. Head south where the climate is more hospitable. Find work in one of the unregulated zones. The unregulated zones are just as dangerous, but for different reasons," Gideon replied, setting a steaming mug on the small table between them. "The directorate may not have official jurisdiction there, but they have informants everywhere. And without protection or connections, you'd be vulnerable to those who prey on aliens in those areas." Sarah accepted the mug, inhaling the unfamiliar but pleasant aroma. "And your network can offer protection? Not just protection, community, purpose." Gideon's expression grew more animated than she had yet seen it. "We're building something important, Sarah, something that could change things." "You sound like a revolutionary," she observed, taking a cautious sip of the hot liquid. "Not in the way you're thinking. We're not planning to overthrow the directorate with force. That would be suicide. We're creating alternatives, ways to exist outside their system until enough people realize there can be another way." There was a passion in his voice that hadn't been present the night before, a glimpse of the person he might have been before the directorate had shaped him into a rejection officer. "Tell me about your home," he said abruptly, changing the subject. "If you don't mind." The request caught Sarah off guard. Few humans had ever expressed interest in her origins beyond determining her legal status. "It was beautiful," she said after a moment of consideration. "Crystalline forests that sang when the wind passed through them. Lakes so clear you could see the ancient ruins at the bottom. Cities built in harmony with the natural formations rather than dominating them." "Was." Gideon noted her use of past tense. Sarah's expression darkened. "The directorate's influence extends beyond Earth. When they declared our kind resource competitors, our government had a choice: resist and face military intervention, or comply with the new regulations. They chose compliance," Gideon guessed. "At first, implemented the registration systems, the relocation programs, all under the guise of population management." Sarah's fingers tightened around the mug. But it was never going to stop there. Registration became restriction. Restriction became confinement. And then, the purges, Gideon finished quietly. Sarah nodded, her gaze distant as the painful memories surfaced. My family had a small position of influence, educators primarily. When the resistance began forming, our home became a meeting place. We thought we were careful, but she fell silent, the familiar grief swelling within her. You don't have to continue, Gideon offered, understanding in his eyes. No, I want to. Sarah took a steadying breath. They came the night. Directorate trained local forces. My parents. They made sure I escaped through a hidden passage built for such emergencies. I heard the shots as I fled. Gideon's expression had grown stricken. I am sorry. They died so I could live, Sarah said simply. I've been trying to honor that sacrifice ever since, but sometimes it feels like I'm just running in circles. Planet to planet, always one step ahead of the same forces, never finding a real home. A heavy silence fell between them, filled with the weight of shared understanding. One who had been part of the system that created such suffering, one who had suffered because of it. The gap seemed unbridgeable, and yet here they were, sharing space and stories. The moment was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Both froze, exchanging alarmed glances. Gideon moved silently to the window, peering cautiously through a crack in the frost covering. It's all right, he said after a moment, his posture relaxing slightly. It's one of ours. Sarah remained tense as Gideon opened the door, revealing a bundled figure stamping snow from their boots. The newcomer pushed back their hood, revealing a human face, female, middle-aged, with sharp features and alert eyes that immediately locked onto Sarah. You didn't mention you had company, Gideon, the woman said, her tone neutral but her gaze assessing. It was unexpected, Gideon replied. Sarah, this is Maya. She's part of the network. Maya stepped fully into the shelter, closing the door behind her. An alien in Sector 9K, she observed. Bold move, considering the increased patrols. Not bold. Desperate, Sarah corrected, meeting the woman's gaze steadily. I had little choice in the matter. Maya held her gaze for a moment longer before her expression softened marginally. Few of us do these days. She turned to Gideon. Speaking of patrols, that's why I'm here. They've changed the schedule again. 3 sweeps planned for this sector in the next cycle. Gideon frowned. That's unusual. Any indication they're looking for something specific? Someone, Maya corrected, glancing meaningfully at Sarah. Word came down from a source in Central that they're hunting a particular alien, one with connections to a resistance cell off-world. Sarah stiffened. That could be anyone. True, Maya conceded. But the timing of your arrival makes for quite a coincidence. I'm not leading them here, Sarah said firmly. I've been careful. We all think we're being careful, Maya replied, not unkindly. But the Directorate's technology advances faster than our countermeasures. Gideon interrupted what was becoming a tense exchange. What's the immediate plan? If there are increased patrols, we need to accelerate the timeline for moving Sarah to the safe house in Sector 12. Maya shook her head. That route's compromised. We lost contact with the checkpoint in Sector 10 last night. Could be the storm, could be something worse. The tunnel, then, Gideon suggested. It's not finished, but it's passable for most of the way to Junction 4. Too risky without proper mapping, Maya countered. One wrong turn in those maintenance corridors, and you end up in a dead end, or worse, right in a director facility. As they debated options, Sarah moved to the window, gazing out at the snow-covered wasteland of Sector 9K. The storm had left behind a deceptive beauty, pristine white covering the decay and abandonment. In the distance, a glint of metal caught her eye, a patrol drone making its rounds. We don't have much time, she said, interrupting the ongoing discussion. There's a drone approaching from the east quadrant. Gideon immediately joined her at the window, cursing under his breath at the sight. It's too early. The pattern indicated a sweep no sooner than midday. They're adapting, Maya said grimly, learning the patterns of our movements. We need to move, Gideon decided, already gathering essentials into a small pack. Sarah, take this. He handed her a thermal jacket far more suitable for the climate than her current attire. Maya, can you create a diversion at the Junction 3 entrance? Just enough to draw attention away from our exit route. Maya nodded, already pulling her hood back up. 15 minutes. Make it count. She paused at the door, fixing Sarah with an intense look. If you are what they're hunting so aggressively, we need to have a longer conversation about why. With that, she slipped out into the snow. Gideon continued his hurried preparations, retrieving hidden caches of supplies from various concealed compartments around the shelter. The tunnel will take us part of the way, he explained as he worked. Then we'll need to cross an exposed section to reach the next safe house. It's not ideal, but... Gideon, Sarah interrupted, her voice suddenly quiet. If I am the one they're looking for specifically, I should go alone. I won't risk your network for my safety. Gideon paused, meeting her gaze directly. That's not how this works, Sarah. No one gets left behind. Not anymore. You don't understand, she pressed. What Maya said about resistance connections. It's not entirely inaccurate. Something in her tone made Gideon stop his preparations entirely. What aren't you telling me? Sarah hesitated, weighing years of ingrained caution against the trust this human had shown her. Before I left my home planet, I was entrusted with something. Information. Coordinates to hidden outposts established by my people before the purges began. Places the Directorate doesn't know exist. Potential safe havens, Gideon realized, understanding dawning on his face. More than that, research facilities, ships, resources that could help not just my kind, but anyone seeking to exist beyond the Directorate's reach. Sarah tapped her temple. The data is encoded in a neural implant. That's what they're hunting. Not just me, but what I carry. The implications hung in the air between them. If what Sarah claimed was true, she represented more than just another refugee to be sheltered. She was carrying hope for countless others, alien and human alike. Before Gideon could respond, a distant explosion shook the building slightly. Maya's diversion. We need to move, he said, making his decision. We'll sort out the rest once you're secure. He activated the tunnel entrance, revealing the narrow passageway that represented their best chance at escape. As Sarah prepared to descend, the sound of heavy vehicles approaching reached them. That's not a standard patrol, Gideon said, alarm evident in his voice. They've sent a tactical unit. Sarah faltered at the entrance to the tunnel. This is my fault. I brought this down on you. No time for that now, Gideon urged, glancing nervously at the window where shadows were already moving past. Go. I'll be right behind you. Sarah descended into the darkness, Gideon following close behind after sealing the entrance. The tunnel was narrow and roughly hewn, clearly a work in progress. Emergency lights activated as they moved, casting eerie blue shadows against the earthen walls. How far does this go? Sarah asked, her voice hushed despite the insulation between them and the surface. About half a kilometer as it stands. Eventually, it will connect to an abandoned maintenance network that runs beneath several sectors. Gideon's voice echoed slightly in the confined space. Watch your step here. The ground isn't entirely stable. They moved as quickly as caution would allow, the sounds of disturbance above fading into silence the further they progressed. Sarah's mind raced with the implications of what was happening. If the Directorate had sent a tactical unit rather than standard patrols, they must have somehow tracked her to Sector 9K. But how? She had been meticulous about covering her trail, following every countermeasure she had learned from years on the run. Unless... Gideon, she said suddenly, pausing in her tracks. I need to check something. Without waiting for a response, she began methodically examining her clothing, searching for anything that might have been placed there without her knowledge. Her fingers froze when they encountered a small, hard object embedded in the seam of her garment, too regular in shape to be a natural part of. The fabric. They tagged me, she whispered, a cold dread washing over her. Somehow, they managed to plant a tracker. Gideon's expression hardened as he examined the tiny device she had extracted. Subdermal signal booster. Latest model. It amplifies your natural biosignature to cut through dampening fields. Like the ones in your shelter, Sarah realized. That's how they found me so quickly. We need to dispose of it, Gideon said, already looking around for options. No será counter. If it stops transmitting suddenly, they'll know we've found it. We need to use it. She glanced down the tunnel ahead of them, then back the way they had come. I'll go back to the surface, create a false trail away from the network. Led them on a chase while you warn the others. Absolutely not, Gideon replied immediately. That's suicide. It's strategic, Sarah insisted. I've evaded them before. I can do it again. Not against a tactical unit. They shoot first and verify identity later. Gideon's expression was unyielding. There's another way. Before Sarah could argue further, a rumbling sound from above cut through their debate. Dust and small debris began to fall from the ceiling of the tunnel. They're using ground-penetrating scanners, Gideon said grimly. We don't have much time before they locate the tunnel. Then make a decision, Sarah urged. But make it quickly. Gideon's features settled into a determined expression. Give me the tracker. Sarah hesitated only briefly before handing over the tiny device. Gideon immediately moved to a junction in the tunnel where a narrow offshoot branched to the right. This section was abandoned. It leads to an unstable area I haven't reinforced yet, he explained as he carefully placed the tracker in a small crevice in the wall. If we're lucky, they'll follow the signal and waste time in a dead end while we reach the safe point. And if we're not lucky, then we run very, very fast. Gideon managed a tight smile. Come on. Junction 4 isn't far now. They continued their hurried journey through the tunnel, the sounds of pursuit growing more distant as the Directorate forces presumably followed the tracker's signal down the false path. Eventually, the narrow passageway opened into a larger chamber that appeared to be part of an older infrastructure system. Pipes and conduits lined the walls, many corroded or damaged by time. We're beneath the boundary between Sector 9K and Sector 10 now, Gideon explained, pausing to consult a hand-drawn map he produced from his pocket. The safe house is located approximately half a kilometer east, but we'll need to surface briefly to cross between systems. Sarah nodded, trying to memorize the route in case they became separated. How many people know about these tunnels? Only those who need to know. The network operates on a cell structure. Each group has knowledge only of their immediate connections. Gideon folded the map carefully. It's safer that way. If one person is captured, they can't compromise the entire operation. Smart, Sarah acknowledged. But it also means limited communication and coordination. True, we rely heavily on scheduled check-ins and predetermined protocols. Gideon led the way toward what appeared to be an access ladder leading upward. This is our exit point. I'll go first to verify it's clear. He ascended the ladder and carefully pushed open a heavy metal cover, letting in a shaft of pale daylight. After a moment of surveillance, he gestured for Sarah to follow. The surface area they emerged into was a desolate no-man's land between sectors, a stretch of cracked concrete and twisted metal with minimal cover. In the distance, the hulking silhouettes of abandoned industrial equipment provided the only break in the otherwise exposed terrain. We'll need to move quickly, Gideon said, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. That structure on the far side, the one with the collapsed roof, that's our entry point to the next tunnel system. Sarah squinted against the harsh glare of sunlight on snow. How long to cross? 5 minutes at a sprint. Longer if we need to take cover. Gideon's gaze swept the area methodically. Ready, Sarah nodded, pulling the thermal jacket tighter around her frame. Together, they emerged fully from the tunnel entrance, immediately setting a rapid pace across the exposed ground. The snow crunched beneath their boots, each step leaving a clear trail that made Sarah uneasy. If the Directorate realized they'd been led astray by the tracker, this path would be all too easy to follow. They had covered perhaps half the distance to their destination when the distinctive whine of a drone engine cut through the silence. Both froze instinctively, scanning the sky. There, Gideon pointed to a small black dot approaching from the north. Standard reconnaissance model. Its primary function is to record and relay, not engage. That's small comfort. If it alerts the tactical unit to our position, Sarah replied tersely. The structure ahead has an underground component that should shield us from scans. We just need to reach it before the drone gets a clear visual. Gideon glanced at Sarah. Run. Don't stop for anything. They abandoned all pretense of caution, sprinting across the remaining distance as the drone altered its course, clearly having detected movement. The whine of its engines grew louder, more insistent, as it accelerated toward them. Sarah's lungs burned in the cold air, each breath feeling like inhaling shards of ice. The structure ahead seemed to recede rather than draw closer, a cruel optical illusion born of desperation. Behind them, the drone had begun emitting a high-pitched signal, an alert to nearby patrols. Just as they reached the shadow of the decrepit building, a different sound joined the drone's persistent whine, the heavy rumble of vehicle engines. A patrol had picked up the alert and was responding. "In here," Gideon urged, ducking through a narrow gap in the structure's corroded wall. Sarah followed, finding herself in what had once been some kind of processing plant. Massive, rust-covered machinery loomed in the shadows, creating a labyrinthine interior. Gideon led her swiftly through the maze, clearly familiar with the layout. "The access point is beneath the main cooling system," he explained between labored breaths. "Once we're in the tunnel, we'll have a straight shot to the safe house." They reached a section where the floor had partially collapsed, revealing a lower level beneath. Gideon lowered himself down first, then helped Sarah navigate the drop. The drone's signal continued overhead, now joined by the sounds of the patrol entering the building. Booted feet on metal, voices calling out orders. "This way," Gideon whispered, guiding Sarah through the dimly lit lower level. Water dripped from overhead pipes, forming small frozen puddles on the concrete floor. At the far end, barely visible in the gloom, stood a heavy door marked with faded hazard symbols. As they approached, a figure emerged from the shadows beside it, weapon raised. "Stop right there," a voice commanded. Sarah tensed, preparing to flee, but Gideon raised his hand slowly. "Maya sent us. The nest is compromised." The figure hesitated, then lowered the weapon. "Gideon? You're supposed to be holding position in Sector 9K. "Change of plans," Gideon replied, gesturing towards Sarah. "This is Sarah. She needs immediate transport to a secure location." The figure stepped forward into a shaft of light from above, revealing a weathered face with a jagged scar running from temple to jaw. "I'm Tomas, and you've brought a tactical unit down on our heads." His tone was accusatory but resigned. "They were already coming," Sarah interjected. "They tracked me to Sector 9K. Thomas's gaze sharpened as he studied her. "You must be carrying something valuable for them to deploy a tactical unit." It wasn't a question. Before Sarah could respond, the sounds of pursuit grew louder overhead. Thomas made a quick decision, turning to unlock the heavy door. "We'll sort it out later. For now, we move." The door opened to reveal another tunnel, this one better constructed than Gideon's. Reinforced walls, proper lighting, even ventilation systems. Thomas led them through at a brisk pace, securing the door behind them. "This will take us to the safe house in Sector 11, he explained as they walked. "We've had to reroute. Sector 12 is no longer viable." "What happened?" Gideon asked, concern evident in his tone. "Raid. 3 days ago. We lost contact with the entire cell." Thomas's expression remained neutral, but the tightness around his eyes spoke of deeper emotions. "We're still assessing the damage, but initial reports suggest a breach in communications protocol." "Anyone captured?" Gideon's voice had grown quiet. "We don't know for certain. 2 confirmed casualties. The rest." Thomas trailed off, leaving the grim possibilities unspoken. Sarah watched the exchange with growing unease. The network Gideon had described with such hope was clearly under significant pressure. And now, because of her presence, another safe house had been compromised. "I should never have brought this to your doorstep," she said softly. "If not us, then who?" Thomas replied without looking back. "The directorate has made living openly impossible for your kind. Where else would you go?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, as they continued their journey through the tunnel. After what seemed like hours, but was likely only 30 minutes, they arrived at a junction where the path split in 3 directions. Thomas consulted a device on his wrist, a more sophisticated version of the maps Gideon had been using. "We take the center path. The safe house is approximately half a kilometer ahead." As they prepared to continue, the sound of distant voices echoed from the direction they had. Come. Thomas's expression hardened. They've breached the door faster than expected, he said grimly. We need to move. Now. They set off at a run, abandoning stealth for speed. The tunnel began to slope upward, the air growing noticeably warmer, a sign they were approaching inhabited areas. Finally, they reached another door, this one concealed behind what appeared to be a maintenance panel. Thomas entered a code on a hidden keypad, and the panel slid aside. Welcome to Haven, he said as they stepped through into a dimly lit chamber. Sarah's eyes widened as she took in her surroundings. What had appeared from the tunnel entrance to be a small room opened into a much larger space, a vast subterranean chamber that had once been part of a transit system. The curved ceiling rose several stories above them, disappearing into shadow. Along the walls, makeshift dwellings had been constructed from salvaged materials, creating a vertical village of sorts. And there were people, dozens of them, humans and aliens alike, moving about with purpose. Some were tending to hydroponic gardens that lined one wall. Others were engaged in repair work, or cooking, or teaching small groups of children. This is your network, Sarah asked, unable to hide her astonishment. One note of it, Thomas confirmed. Each sector has similar sanctuaries connected by the tunnels. We live, work, and resist together. Gideon watched Sarah's reaction with a small smile. I told you we were building something important. Before Sarah could respond, an alarm began to sound. 3 short pulses followed by a longer tone. The bustling activity in the chamber immediately transformed as people moved with practiced efficiency toward predetermined positions. Perimeter alert, Thomas explained, already moving toward a communication station set up on a raised platform. The patrol must have followed us through the tunnels. Gideon's expression turned grave. How long until they reach Haven? Minutes at most. We need to initiate evacuation protocols. Thomas turned to Sarah. Your presence has accelerated their timeline. They were bound to find us eventually, but now we have no choice but to abandon this location. The accusation in his tone was clear, but Sarah met his gaze without flinching. Then let me help. If it's me they want, I can draw them away. No, Gideon interjected firmly. We don't sacrifice anyone. That's not how we operate. Thomas hesitated, clearly torn between practical necessity and the principles of the network. After a moment, he nodded sharply. Gideon's right. We evacuate together. Sarah, stay with Gideon. He'll guide you to the secondary rally point. As Thomas moved to coordinate the evacuation, Gideon led Sarah through the rapidly organizing chaos toward a supply area. Take only what you can carry easily, he advised, handing her a small backpack. Water, emergency rations, basic medical supplies. Sarah accepted the pack, her movements mechanical as guilt washed over her. All around, people were hastily gathering belongings, parents soothing frightened children, teams checking weapons and communications equipment. An entire community disrupted because she had sought shelter from a storm. This is my fault, she said, watching as a group of alien children, a species she recognized from a neighboring system to her own, were ushered toward an exit by their caretakers. Gideon paused in his preparations to face her directly. No, Sarah, this is the Directorate's fault. Their policies, their persecution, their relentless pursuit of control. You're a victim of that system, not its cause. But if I hadn't come to Sector 9K, then you might have frozen to death in the storm, Gideon interrupted, and all the knowledge you carry would have been lost. Is that a better outcome? Before Sarah could respond, a deafening explosion rocked the chamber. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling as lights flickered ominously. They've breached the outer defenses, Thomas called from the command platform. All units to evacuation routes. We have less than 5 minutes. The orderly evacuation immediately accelerated to urgent flight. Gideon grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her toward a corridor opposite for where they had entered. All around them, people streamed toward various exits, following pre-established evacuation routes. Where are we going? Sarah asked as they ran. Secondary rally point in Sector 13, Gideon replied, his breath coming in short bursts. It's further than planned, but it's our best option now. They joined a stream of refugees, moving through a narrow service corridor that sloped steadily upward. Behind them, the sounds of combat erupted, the sharp reports of weapons fire echoing through the tunnels. A defensive rearguard was buying time for the evacuation. As they reached a junction where the corridors split, a figure stumbled from a side passage, collapsing against the wall. Sarah recognized him. Immediately, the same man she had glimpsed through Gideon's window in Sector 9K, watching as she knocked on door after door in the storm. Marcus! Gideon rushed to the man's side, supporting him as he struggled to remain upright. There was blood seeping through his clothing, a wound in his side that his hand was pressed against in a futile attempt to stem the flow. "They're coming from both directions." Marcus gasped, his face pale with pain and blood loss. "Cornered us in Section 6. The others didn't make it." Gideon's expression hardened. "Can you walk?" Marcus attempted to straighten, but his legs buckled beneath him. "Not fast enough to keep up. You need to go. Now." "We're not leaving you," Gideon insisted, looking to Sarah for help. Together, they supported Marcus between them, continuing down the corridor at a significantly reduced pace. The rally point. "You'll never make it. With me slowing you down," Marcus protested weakly. "Then we'll find another way," Gideon replied, his tone brooking no argument. "There's always another way." The corridor ended at a heavy metal door. Gideon released his hold on Marcus, leaving Sarah to support the injured man while he worked to open the door. It was clearly designed as an emergency exit, reinforced and sealed with multiple locks. "This leads to the surface," Gideon explained as he manipulated the complex locking mechanism. "We'll be exposed, but it's our only option now." The door finally yielded with a hiss of hydraulics. Cold air rushed in as it swung open, revealing a narrow alleyway between derelict buildings. Daylight was fading, the encroaching dusk painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of purple and blue. They emerged cautiously, helping Marcus navigate the short drop to the ground. The sounds of pursuit were more distant now, suggesting they had gained some temporary advantage by taking this less obvious route. "Where now?" Sarah asked, scanning their surroundings for threats or opportunities. Gideon oriented himself quickly, pointing toward a cluster of buildings to the east. "There's an abandoned medical facility in that direction. It's not a designated safe house, but it should have supplies we can use for Marcus." They set off through the gathering darkness, moving as quickly as Marcus's condition would allow. The city around them, if it could still be called that, was a hollowed-out shell of its former self. Buildings stood empty, their windows dark, streets littered with the detritus of societal collapse in this forgotten sector. As they approached the medical facility, a low, bunker-like structure with faded emergency symbols on its exterior, the distant whine of drone engines returned. They quickened their pace, practically dragging Marcus the final distance to the building's entrance. The door was locked, but years of neglect had weakened the frame. Gideon applied his shoulder with determined force, and, after several attempts, the door gave way with a splintering crack. Inside, the facility was dark and silent, the air thick with dust and the musty scent of abandonment. Gideon produced a small light from his pack, illuminating a reception area with upended furniture and scattered documentation. "This way," he directed, leading them deeper into the facility. Treatment rooms would be in the back. They found what they were looking for, a former emergency ward with examination tables still in place, cabinets that might once have held supplies, and most importantly, no windows through which drones could spot their movement. Gideon helped Marcus onto one of the tables, then began searching the cabinets for anything useful. Most had been emptied long ago, either by the facility staff during evacuation or by scavengers in the years since. But in a locked storage closet, which yielded to Gideon's determined efforts, they discovered a cache of basic medical supplies that had somehow been overlooked. "It's not much," Gideon said, returning with an armful of sealed packages, "but it might be enough to stabilize him until we can reach proper help." Sarah took over, her movements revealing unexpected familiarity with medical procedures as she cleaned and dressed Marcus's wound. The bleeding is slowing, but he's lost a lot of blood, she assessed quietly. He needs proper medical attention, not just field dressings. Marcus, who had been drifting in and out of consciousness, suddenly gripped Gideon's arm with surprising strength. The data, he rasped. Did you secure it? Gideon exchanged a puzzled glance with Sarah. What data, Marcus? The transmission from Outpost 7. Coordinates for the refuge. Marcus's voice was fading, his grip loosening. They can't find it. Too important. Realization dawned on Sarah's face. He's talking about the information I'm carrying, she said softly. Somehow he knows. Marcus's eyes focused on Sarah with new intensity. You're the carrier? A weak smile touched his lips. Then it worked. The message got through. What message? Gideon pressed, leaning closer to catch Marcus's failing words. Your people, Marcus said, addressing Sarah directly now. They sent word, through channels, seeking allies, so the carrier would come, with a key to everything. His breathing had grown more labored, each word clearly costing him effort. Been waiting, watching for someone like you. Sarah's mind raced as she processed this revelation. You're saying my arrival wasn't just chance? That someone knew I was coming. Marcus managed a slight nod. Network has contacts. Off-world. Been preparing. For months. His gaze shifted to Gideon. Why do you think? I redirected you. To Sector 9K? Needed someone there. Someone who would open their door. Gideon sat back, stunned by the implication. You manipulated my placement? All this time, I thought it was my choice to hide there. Not manipulation. Guidance, Marcus correctet vicli. Needed someone with your history. Someone seeking redemption. A coughing fit overtook him, and when it subsided, there was fresh blood on his lips. Knew you'd open. Door number 18. The pieces fell into place for Sarah. The strangeness of finding Gideon's light in the storm. The unlikely coincidence of a former directorate official willing to help her. The swift arrival of the network's members after her discovery. You've been watching me since I landed on Earth, she stated. Not a question, but a realization. Marcus couldn't respond verbally anymore, but his eyes confirmed her suspicion. Why didn't you just approach me directly? Sarah demanded, a surge of anger cutting through her exhaustion. Why let me struggle, nearly die in that storm? Needed to be certain, Marcus managed after a moment. Directorate has plants. Imposters. You're knocking on doors. Surviving the cold. Proved you were genuine. The absurdity of it, that her suffering had been a test of authenticity, struck Sarah like a physical blow. People died in those conditions. Others like me, who maybe didn't find door number 18. War requires sacrifices, Marcus whispered, his strength clearly fading rapidly now. The refuge. It's worth any price. The last hope. His voice trailed off as consciousness slipped away, his breathing shallow but stabilized for the moment. Sarah stepped back from the examination table, her expression a complex mixture of anger, confusion, and reluctant understanding. Gideon had remained silent during this exchange, processing the revelation that his role in this drama had been at least partially engineered. Now he turned to Sarah, his expression troubled. Did you know about any of this? He asked quietly. Sarah shook her head, her silver hair catching the dim light. I knew only that I carried valuable information, coordinates to secret outposts established by my people. I was told to find allies on Earth who could help access and utilize that information. She met his gaze directly. But I had no idea there was an organized network already aware of my mission, watching and waiting for my arrival. And testing you, Gideon added, glancing at Marcus's unconscious form. Letting you suffer to ensure you weren't a directorate plant. A cruel methodology, Sarah acknowledged, but not entirely illogical. The stakes are too high for blind trust. The distant sound of vehicles interrupted their conversation. Heavy transport units, by the sound of them, moving systematically through the area. The directorate's search was expanding. We can't stay here, Gideon decided, already gathering the remaining medical supplies. They'll sweep every building in the sector. We need to keep moving toward the rally point. With Marcus in this condition, Sarah gestured toward the injured man. He can barely maintain consciousness, let alone travel. Gideon's expression turned grim as he faced the impossible choice before them. If we stay, we'll all be captured. The information you carry will be lost. And if we leave him, he dies, Sarah countered. Is that how your network operates? Abandoning the wounded when they become inconvenient. The barb struck home. Gideon flinched visibly. Of course not. But sometimes. No, sarà interrupti fermati. You once told me that opening doors was a choice. That helping others when 17 doors remain closed is what makes us better than the directorate. I refuse to close this door on Marcus, regardless of how he manipulated us. Gideon stared at her for a long moment, conflict evident in his expression. Then, something shifted in his eyes, a resolution taking hold. You're right, he said simply. We find another way. Always. He turned to study the facility's layout more carefully. This place would have had emergency transport, ambulances, or medical evacuation vehicles. If we're lucky, something might still be functional in the garage area. They worked quickly, Sarah staying with Marcus while Gideon searched the facility. The sounds of the directorate's search grew incrementally closer with each passing minute, adding urgency to their efforts. Gideon returned after what seemed an eternity, but was likely only 15 minutes. Found something, he reported, his expression cautiously optimistic. Old medical transport in the lower garage. Power cells are depleted, but there's a portable generator that might have enough charge to start it. Working together, they carefully moved Marcus to a makeshift stretcher improvised from an examination table that had wheels still intact. The journey through the dark corridors of the abandoned facility was nerve-wracking. Every sound potentially signaling discovery, every shadow possibly concealing danger. The garage level was even darker than the floors above, the air thick with the sense of old fuel and decaying rubber. Gideon's light revealed several vehicles in various states of disrepair, but one, a bulky medical transport designed for emergency evacuation, appeared relatively intact. The structure of these is reinforced to protect patients during crisis transport, Gideon explained as they worked to open the rear doors. The exterior shell might shield Marcus's biosignature from detection while we move. The interior of the transport contained basic medical monitoring equipment, most of it non-functional after years without maintenance. But the padded surfaces designed for patient transport would make Marcus's journey more stable. Once they had settled him inside, Gideon turned his attention to the vehicle's power systems. The portable generator, a compact device likely used for emergency field procedures, still contained some charge. He connected it to the transport's power intake, muttering calculations under his breath as he worked. It won't fully charge the cells, he warned Sarah, but it might give us enough power for a short journey. 20 kilometers at most. Is that enough to reach the rally point? Gideon shook his head. No, but it might get us to a junction point where we can access the underground transit network. If we can reach that, we have options. The generator hummed to life, feeding precious energy into the transport's depleted systems. Lights flickered on the control panel, some remaining dark, others glowing weakly. It's working, Gideon said, unable to hide his surprise at their good fortune. Not all systems are online, but the drive mechanism is responding. We need to go now, while we still have power. Sarah climbed into the back with Marcus, monitoring his condition, while Gideon took the controls. The transport's engine engaged with a whining sound that seemed deafening after the tense silence. But it moved, rolling toward the garage exit that led to a service ramp. As they emerged into the fading twilight, the first flakes of a new snowfall were beginning to drift down from a slate-gray sky. Gideon navigated carefully, keeping the transport's lights off to avoid detection despite the growing darkness. Which way? Sarah asked from the rear compartment. Gideon oriented himself, then pointed eastward, away from the sounds of the directorate's search. There's a maintenance entrance to the old transit system about 10 kilometers in that direction. If we can reach it without being spotted, we might have a chance. They set off through the deserted streets, the transport moving at a deliberate pace to conserve power. All around them, the abandoned city stood as a silent witness to their passage. Buildings like skeletal sentinels, streets like dried riverbeds, the occasional flutter of something that might have been wildlife or might have been debris caught in the strengthening wind. Marcus stirred occasionally, murmuring incoherently before slipping back into unconsciousness. Sarah monitored him as best she could with the limited equipment, but his condition was clearly deteriorating. The temporary treatment she had administered was only delaying the inevitable without proper medical intervention. They had covered perhaps half the distance to their destination when the transport's power levels began to drop precipitously. The already dim control panel lights flickered warningly, and the engine's whine took on a strained quality. "We're losing power faster than I anticipated," Gideon reported grimly. "The cold is affecting the cell's efficiency." "How much further can we go?" Sarah asked, her breath fogging in the increasingly cold interior as non-essential systems, including environmental controls, shut down to conserve energy. 3 kilometers. Maybe 4. Gideon's expression was tight with tension. Not enough to reach the transit entrance. As if to punctuate this grim assessment, a spotlight suddenly cut through the darkness ahead of them, sweeping across the street in a methodical pattern. A Directorate patrol vehicle had moved into their path, its advanced sensors likely already detecting their presence despite the transport's shielding. "Hold on," Gideon warned, abruptly changing course down a narrow side street. The transport protested the sharp turn, its overtaxed systems struggling to respond to the sudden demands placed upon them. The spotlight followed, accompanied now by the distinctive sound of a pursuit alert, a pulsing tone designed to call in reinforcements. More lights appeared behind them as additional units responded to the signal. "They found us," Sarah stated unnecessarily, bracing herself and Marcus as the transport bounced over debris in the street. Gideon didn't respond, his entire focus on navigating the deteriorating vehicle through the maze of abandoned structures while evading the closing net of Directorate forces. The power indicators continued their inexorable decline, each passing minute bringing them closer to complete immobilization. Just as it seemed they would be overtaken, a new sound joined the chaos. The deep, resonant boom of an explosion somewhere behind them. The pursuing vehicles hesitated, their spotlights swiveling to locate the source of the disturbance. The network, Gideon realized, they're creating a diversion. Seizing the opportunity, he guided the failing transport down an access ramp that led beneath street level. The underground passage was tight, clearly not designed for vehicles of their size, but the transport scraped through with centimeters to spare. The passage opened into what had once been a subterranean parking structure. Gideon navigated through the darkened space until the transport finally gave out, its power cells completely depleted. "End of the line," he said, shutting down the remaining systems to prevent any residual energy signatures that might be detected. "We'll have to continue on foot from here." Sarah glanced at Marcus, who had grown alarmingly pale. "He won't survive being moved again without proper stabilization." Gideon's expression hardened with determination. "Then we make our stand here. The network knows we're in the area. The diversion proves they're operating nearby. If we can hold out long enough, they'll find us." As if in answer to his statement, a soft tapping sound echoed through the darkness, a rhythmic pattern that Gideon clearly recognized. His posture immediately relaxed as he moved toward the source of the sound. "Here," he called softly. "We're here." A section of what had appeared to be solid wall slid aside, revealing a hidden passage and a figure holding a shielded light. "Took you long enough," Maya's voice came from the darkness. "We've been tracking your position since you left the medical facility." "Marcus is badly wounded," Gideon explained as Maya entered, accompanied by 2 others carrying proper medical equipment. "He needs immediate attention." Maya's expression turned somber as she assessed Marcus's condition. "We have a field station set up nearby. Dr. Evans is waiting." She turned to Sarah, her earlier suspicion now tempered with a reluctant respect. "Thomas told me you refused to leave him behind." "That was unexpected." "Why?" Sarah challenged. "Because aliens are supposed to care only for their own kind? Because people who carry what you carry typically prioritize the mission above individual lives," Maya corrected. The directorate certainly does. Then perhaps that's the difference between us and them, Sarah replied simply. Maya held her gaze for a moment longer, then nodded slightly, an acknowledgement, if not quite acceptance. Let's move. The diversion won't distract them for long. The medical team transferred Marcus to a proper stretcher, attaching portable monitoring equipment that immediately began registering his vital signs. The group moved swiftly through the hidden passage, which connected to yet another section of the vast underground network that seemed to honeycomb the forgotten sectors. After navigating several turns and security checkpoints, they arrived at what appeared to be a repurposed maintenance hub. Equipment that had once serviced the city's infrastructure had been adapted to serve the needs of the resistance network. In one corner, a medical area had been established with surprisingly sophisticated equipment. A tall, thin man with wire-rimmed glasses looked up from preparing instruments as they entered. "Bring him here," he directed, gesturing toward a treatment table. Dr. Evans, Maya introduced as the team transferred Marcus to the table. Our chief medical officer for this sector. Dr. Evans worked quickly, assessing Marcus's condition with practiced efficiency. Significant blood loss, internal damage, but the preliminary treatment bought him valuable time, he noted, glancing at Sarah. Your work. Sarah nodded. Basic field dressing only. I'm not trained in H.